This week on Shift Points, we work on the 55 truck trying to cool down our intake air temperatures. Thank you guys so much for joining. Parking outside and there was a ton of He started this project. Found a piece of brass he's going to take. Alright everyone. Alright guys, this week we are back working on Dad's 55 Chevrolet truck. If you guys have been following along with us since the very beginning, this truck was what kicked off our YouTube channel. This truck was built, it was a customer truck. Dad ended up getting the truck, buying the truck off the customer, and then we finished it up and took it on Hot Rod Power Tour last year. You guys can go back and watch all those videos. There's many of them on getting this truck ready, and then the 5 days of Power Tour of 2023. So this week we're going to work on it a little more. We're going to make a handful of changes to it for a little deal that's coming up here in the next months. I'll tell you guys more information about that event whenever I actually know more about it. But anyway, we want to try and do some stuff to kind of make this truck potentially a little quicker, potentially a little safer, make sure we don't try and break anything. Let's say if it was going down a drag strip or something like that. So there's a few things that we got to do to it. The first off that we want to do, this intake here on this truck, right here is our K&N air filter. You guys remember, this just is, the filter goes into this tube and then right into the intake. So we noticed on Power Tour and then from driving this thing around, the intake air temps get pretty warm on this truck. And here in a few minutes we're going to take this out and see if we can figure out exactly. It's pretty warm out today. It's pushing 80 actually today, so it'll be kind of like normal conditions. We're going to drive it around just kind of on the side roads and stuff, kind of see what our intake air temperatures get up to. Of course, you guys know the cooler the air that you can get into your engine, the more fuel that you can put to it, which means the more combustion and the better it's going to run, more power it's going to have. This gets really hot right here. And there's a couple reasons why. While this is set out from the engine as far as we could and keep it under the hood, there's really no airflow here. So with the inner fender that's right here, the fan shroud that's on it, there's just not a lot of air that flows up into this area to get cool air to the filter itself. So that's the main reason why we get these higher air intake temperatures than we want. And the other thing is because everything's so tight in here, right there is the exhaust manifold. I mean, it's about a foot away. So you can see those are the Holley exhaust manifolds that we put on this, or the Hooker exhaust manifolds that we put on this thing, and they get pretty warm. I mean, any exhaust manifold would. Nothing wrong with them. It's just, again, kind of where the placement of this filter is in relation to that. So because of all of those things, we get some pretty high air intake temperatures. So we're going to do our best this week to try and get those temperatures down as much as we can. So we have a plan for that, and I'm going to tell you guys about it after we get the truck out and drive it and see what those air intake temperatures are getting to on a normal warm afternoon like it is today. So let's get this thing out and drive it and see how it goes. Alright, so we're taking the truck down the road now. We're going to kind of, it's about 71 degrees right now. So right around there, the truck, I usually would have my HP tuners with me, but I left it at the house today. So we're just using Dad's micro scan. It's just like a Snap-on brand scan tool, which it'll let you do current data, live data. So right now, going down the road, our intake air temperature is at 97 degrees. Of course, that's going to go up if it's parked or if we're sitting there idling. And like I said, it's pretty cool right now. It's only about 70. So that temperature is hovering right around 95 degrees Fahrenheit right now. So let's drive it a little bit and see what it does. So we took it through right in the middle of town, Mars Hill, and kind of let it idle up through everything. Right now it's running. You can see there that top number is about 118 degrees Fahrenheit. From everything I've read online, they say kind of a rule of thumb is roughly like 45. I've read a couple different things why I hesitate to say this. Sometimes, like rule of thumb, they were saying like 2 times whatever the ambient temperature is, or I saw some people saying about 50 degrees more than what the ambient temperature is kind of what you want to see your intake temperatures to be. So if that's the case, that would be like 120 to 150. And if that's the case, we're actually doing a little bit better than we kind of thought. So we're just gonna sit here. We're in a parking lot now.
Like we're at a red light.
Like we're at a red light, and we wanted to just kind of let things heat soak a little bit more before we go down the road, because we've only driven it to Mars Hill, which is only less than it's about 5 miles from Dad's house. So we'll let this thing heat soak a little bit, and then take it back out, and then kind of see where it levels out at. So now we are sitting here in the parking lot, and Dad had a really good idea of sitting here until the fans come on. So we're gonna let this thing heat up. We're pretty close to the fans coming on. We're curious about what that does to the intake air temp. So right now we're sitting at 135 degrees. The fans they should be on here in just maybe another minute or so. This thing the fans work really well. If you guys remember that, they work really good. So we're gonna let this thing heat up 136 and see what happens when the fan comes on, because it's a Spall fan. It's a 16-inch Spall fan, and it really does a number on getting these things getting this thing cooled down. They run for maybe 20-30 seconds usually. So when this kick on, it'll be interesting to see what the intake air temperatures are. Oh, there's the fans. They just kicked on. So we're still at 136 intake air temp. It actually went up a little. There's 138. 140.
Placing the temperature.
142. So there's intake air temp at 140. That's that top line, top number there. 145.
It's getting hotter with the fans on.
It's getting hotter with the fans on.
That's wild.
147. 149. 153. Fans just turned off. It's at 156. 156, so it raised it 20 degrees. It raised the intake air temperatures 20 degrees when the fans came on.
Right, see what it does now when I take it off.
Now we're going to take off and see how much air we can get going down the road and what it ends up taking this thing to. So as we were leaving the parking lot, the fans came on again while we were moving, and it actually went up to about 162 degrees. So it's starting to come back down now. We're gonna go back through the center town Mars Hill here. It looks like it is kind of steadied out right now at about 135. We're kind of going back up a hill, so I expect it to climb a little bit more. But basically this proves that we do want to do something about this. We're just running at almost double the ambient temperature, roughly going down the road. That's 133 it's just dropped down to. So we do want to try and get those intake temps down a little bit more. It would make us, I think this thing would do a little better if we could do that. That's why this will be important to kind of do what we're going to do to try and get some fresh air in there. But anyway, so we basically know this thing runs, intake air temperature wise, runs around 127 to 135 going down the road. And like I said, that at least gives us a baseline to know if the things that we're doing are going to improve it. If we can get some more airflow over that filter, we think that's going to make a big difference here and get these temperatures down, let everything kind of just run a little cooler so that it can do a little better. So that's the plan. We'll get back to the shop now and start working on some stuff to get that done. So if you guys don't know it, Dad built a customer car a lot of years ago now. It was this 34 Ford right here. And if we go and look at it a little bit, there's kind of it in the build process. Not this one here, just that one right there. So it has an LS in it. This was a really nice car. It's still out there. Roger Allison was whose car it was. And anyway, so Dad did a lot of work to that car. And at one point during that, after that car was built, it had an issue where it would just quit. It would just randomly, quit. It was like it was running out of fuel. And it turned out that the inline Walboro pump that was on that car was just not enough to feed the engine what it needed to. It wasn't getting gravity fed. It was just not being able to lift it and then pump it up to the engine. Well, there was a few processes of getting to that realization. One of which was we thought maybe the pump was getting hot, and so we built a heat shield to kind of go over the pump. We thought maybe that the fuel was evaporating because the pump was relatively close to the exhaust on that car. So anyway, this piece right here that Dad's already started working on is that heat shield. So you can see it right there. And so that's this heat shield. This was like some kind of like Dynamat style stuff, supposed to help absorb heat and kind of keep some stuff down. So this piece here was actually put on the frame like this actually, and like I said, it was kind of shielding the pump from the exhaust. Our plan is we took that off of that car, we're going to use that in this truck now. So that's going to be our first step that we're going to take on trying to get these intake air temperatures down. The plan will be to take that, do some cutting and modifying on it, and then mounting it up in a way that'll actually kind of block this whole area off, try and get that exhaust manifold heat and keep it down here low on the engine instead of letting it come up here and radiate into this intake. So that's going to be the first thing that we do, and we're going to kind of do a process here and see each one of these things that we're going to do, how much it drops the intake air temperatures. So once we know what these temperatures are when we go drive it, and we'll mount that heat shield up and then do that again and then see how much that affects it, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So something nice on the LS valve covers here, there's these bosses here and here. We're actually going to utilize those to mount that shield up. So those are M6 by 1 millimeter bolts, same bolt that's in the coil bracket here. So we're going to use those to mount this up. What we'll do is we're actually going to what Dad's going to do is make some spacers that go off of this, go off of those bosses, get that heat shield spaced up here so it'll clear all the coils and everything, and then we'll have clearance for the dipstick tube as well. So we'll do those things. That bolt center on that is 12.5 inches, and our shield is 13.25. So we have just enough here to get those, to get some holes in this shield. Standoffs on those bosses. So Dad's getting this marked up. We'll get the holes drilled, and then that'll let us figure out where we need to cut to clearance for the dipstick tube. So Dad's gonna make the standoffs out of brass to keep them from rusting. And it's easy to machine. And this is the one you put your hand on first? That makes sense. So we went ahead and marked a spot right there. You can see where the cross is there on the flat part of it. That's going to be a clearance hole for the dipstick tube. So I was going to notch it, but Dad, he was right. We could just easily just measure it, which is what we did. 1.5 inches back from that boss, and then out 1 3/8 from where the spacer is going to be. Drill a big hole there for clearance, and then we can just take and put this down over the dipstick tube and then mount it up instead of having to have a big notch clearance there and chance it kind of flopping around. It appears it's way off.
Well, not way off. We're probably a 1/2 inch off, and it's got to go.
Let's just drill that hole bigger. But before I got up here today, Dad already got the heat shield done and bolted up. Fastenal over in Burnsville had the M6 by 1 bolts that we needed to get this thing bolted up. The spacers worked out really good. Let me show you here. He's already got it put in place on the truck. So you can see there, this covers all of that exhaust manifold. He even took and riveted a piece here on the front of this just to help keep that heat that's coming off the front of the exhaust manifold covered up. So like we were laughing about, it's not really kind of photogenic, it's not beautiful, but it's extremely functional, we believe. So we're going to take this thing out now and see what the difference in the intake air tips compared to yesterday were. Just a quick reminder, it was getting up over 160 degrees sitting in the parking lot yesterday. So that's kind of a reference. Going down the road, it was going to like 135. It would kind of set in that 128, 135 range. We look at this again with that highlighted number. Going down the road here, we're under about 126 degrees. It's definitely warmer today. We gotta get home. When we get home, we gotta check the temperature. But it feels a lot hotter today than yesterday. And we're riding down the road, just cruising down through here. It's setting at 126. So we have definitely reduced the temperature a little bit. Definitely, probably a little bit, few degrees maybe, going down the road at least. So that's a good thing. The heat shield itself is probably will be more useful when you set it idle. So if you're sitting there at a red light or something like that, that's to kind of keep that radiant heat down a little. And the next thing that we're gonna try will be, I think, a big game changer, especially going down the road. So when we get back here, I'll show you guys what that is. So that test drive was definitely a success. It's about 6 degrees hotter today than it was yesterday. So it's a little warmer, and we're maintaining a little cooler, maybe 3 to 6 degrees, depending on, there's a little bit of fluctuation just going down the road. 3 to 6 degrees cooler than we were yesterday going down, just cruising down the road. And it's 6 degrees warmer, so I guess it's probably a little bit more of a net gain, probably closer to 8 or 10 degrees better with this heat shield on it. So now the next thing that we're going to do is right here in the radiator cradle, right there, there's a perfect spot. We're going to take and drill a hole. This in front of this radiator cradle is open, and it actually kind of scoops in the way that this grill is made. It kind of scoops and funnels this air up into this area. But there's nowhere for it to go. So Dad's gonna take a hole saw. We're gonna cut as big a hole as we can in this right here. And that's gonna give a direct, and it's almost exactly the same height as the filter. So as we go down the road, this is gonna give basically a direct beeline right into this air filter and help us cool this down even faster and even more when we're going down the road. So this will be more for driving versus sitting in traffic. Alright, that was the holes and the cutting. So that's what we can get a saw to right there. It's kind of a little, kind of an 8 shape there. We're going to see, before we just like finish cleaning anything up, we're going to just see how effective this was. And like I said, that, if you look down in there, you can see that right there, looking through the hole, you can actually see the grill there. So I mean, it's literally going to funnel that air right up into this hole. And like I said, that is right in line with the air cleaner here. So let's see what it does. Alright, so back on the road here, we're already just been cruising down the road. But we've already come down another 5 degrees. If you look there, that 122 is the intake air temperature as we're going down the road cruising. Like I said, this change is definitely going to be the one that causes us to have the most change going down the road. And you can see we've already dropped an additional 5 degrees. So 122 just cruising along here, and it may drop again. It's been kind of steady declining. It got up to about 136 degrees before we pulled out of the driveway, and now there you go, now it's down to 120. So that was a pretty drastic change right there, just drilling those 2 holes and making that into one big thing right there. So like I said, it's definitely feeding directly into the air cleaner, and it's teetering on that 120, 122. So that's another, like I said, about 7 to 9 degrees. Fluctuates just a little, but another pretty big change there. Especially with it being another 6-7 degrees hotter today than it was yesterday. So like I said, if you think about it like that, we were going down the road like 133 degrees yesterday. We're down to 120 now, and it's 6 degrees hotter today. So if we think about that, we're probably close to 140. So we've made about a 20 degree, rough numbers, about a 20 degree Fahrenheit drop in intake air temps right there. So that's a big gain for 2 relatively small deals right there. So Dad took a burr bit and opened this hole up a little more. We've probably just about doubled it in size, I would say. So that looks really good. That should kind of keep this thing, let us have a little bit more air. But I'm definitely going to claim about 20 degrees difference between yesterday, which was 6 degrees cooler than today, versus today going down the road. I would say we've gained about 20 degrees. So pretty big gain for 2 pretty small, small jobs in quotations. Not saying the shield didn't take a little time, it definitely did, but it's a pretty big improvement for just some small stuff that you can kind of knock out pretty quick. So that's going to make a big difference. So I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. That's the first thing that we're going to do to the 55 truck. We've probably got 2 more things we're going to do to it before we come up on this deal here in a couple months maybe. So that's the plan. We'll keep plugging away on this thing. We got some more parts coming in later this week, and then we can start making another video on the second thing we're going to do to this thing. So thank you guys so much for joining. Follow us on social media: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, make sure you like this video, subscribe if you liked it. Hopefully you learned something. That's what we wanted to do. We did, because we definitely tried to figure this stuff out, trying to understand kind of what's going on a little bit more. So anyway, we thank you guys very much. We'll see you next week.